Hello, hello. I'm just checking to make sure that you guys can hear me. Yes, sounds like yes. Welcome, 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 welcome. This is the third episode of Sew Jeaux Live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And we made it to the morning once again. Yes. And why is that important? Because it's my morning show, live and direct from my studio, where we chat about business, sewing, and mo while sipping on a strong cup of Joe. That's Jeaux, as a nod to my maman and my roots as a Louisiana Creole. Comment ça va? Comment ça va, cher? How are you? How you do today? If you're new here, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Grab a drink, sit down, have a chat. If you are a returning subscriber, hey girl, hey. Welcome back. Welcome back. Please like the video as you come in. Your girl is trying to grow this micro channel, and every like, every share helps a great deal. So it would be so much appreciated if you would like and share. And again, if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for? If you like talking about business and sewing and trending topics, this is your home. Come on and hang around with us, have a seat on the couch. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about the things I wish I knew before I started sewing. Okay, and don't hate on me. I wrote notes, okay, because there's a lot that I want to share. So, and once again, I want to like give you everything, okay? I want to give you everything. But before we start, I'm sipping on, once again, I'm hooked on this Nespresso Intenso, and this is with the heavy cream. This is that beautiful caramel color I was talking about. I'll take a sip. While I take a sip, why don't you let me know in the chat where you're tuning in from and what you're sipping? We're getting close to time that this should be Irish, an Irish coffee, right? So, but I'm just gonna. Mm, mm, mm. That's so good. That is so good. And guess what, y'all? I'm using my fabric coasters that I made in the last video. If you've got some scrap fabrics or something that you want, something old that you want to upcycle, these are a great way to make good use of the fabric that's lying around the house. And they're very easy to make, the beautiful mitered corners. Yes. So I'm actually using it today on the set as I kind of develop that. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to take a look at my notes, and here we are going to get started. Okay. All of the things that I wish I knew before I started sewing. Now, some of these things I've been reminded of recently by my students that I teach sewing and fashion to. So, so I've got a nice little list here to go over with you. So, first thing I want to say is things take time, right? So we're so often acclimated to running to the store and picking up something. And I find that a lot of my students are rushing to the finish line because they think that, oh, I'm going to make it. It's going to be easy. No, it's going to take time. And you'll probably figure out that it's not going to be perfect the first time and the second time, and maybe not even the third time. So there's going to be the possibility of getting frustrated, but it's just, it comes with the territory. Okay. So just take your time. It's definitely not a fast sport. So I would say take your time, enjoy. Okay. Let's see. All right. And there's also more than one way to do something. So in the process of learning, if you're getting frustrated with, let's say, putting in a zipper, which can be a little bit of a task if you're a beginner, I would say if you've tried a number of times, jump on the internet on and kind of Google some things and maybe search YouTube. That's a great place to do it. And and look and to see if there are other techniques or ways to do it. I bet you'll probably find a simpler way to handle the same task. So I would just research or use all of the research that's available to you for free. Okay. There is definitely more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to sewing. Okay. There are rules, but the rules are really preferences, right? So even after you have started sewing for a number of years, it may be advised that you do it one way, but you prefer it another way. Well, your way is the rule. So just make good use of all of the tools that you have available, books, in addition to online. Okay. And I kind of mentioned this already. Mistakes will happen. So take your time because mistakes, the one thing about mistakes, um, when now they will frustrate you, but what I will say is the thing that you get most frustrated about, but you work really hard to kind of resolve the issue, Those are the things that you become really, really proficient at. So mistakes actually are quite a bit of a blessing when it comes to sewing because, then you become really confident at those things. But the other thing that I really don't love about mistakes, especially if you have made a mistake and you continue to sew and do several steps after, it can take a really long time to undo the mistake. This little guy here, seam ripper, right? This guy, I have a love hate relationship with. I love it so much because it's so sharp and it works so well to get the seams out. But once again, it usually means I've done something wrong and I need to fix it. And that's time that you could be feeling accomplished and creative. The taking things out doesn't feel that way. It can be quite frustrating. And then the other thing, too, you run the risk of damaging your fabric. So you have to be really, really careful at taking all of those stitches out. So just take your time and resign yourself to the fact that mistakes will happen, um take it in stride. Just take it in stride, especially as you're learning. Just be okay with the fact, okay, and go in knowing that I'm going to make some mistakes and I'm here for the learning journey. Okay, so that's the better attitude to have when you're starting out, and just try not to get frustrated. My students tend to really want to rush to the end, and when they make a mistake, they just like lose it. So I just they are so hard on themselves, and so I would just say, don't be so hard on yourself. Just give yourself grace, and just know that you will make mistakes. Okay, and those mistakes will probably become those things that you are most proficient at. Okay, let's see. Yes, and so I said take breaks. Okay, so if you are going to make them, if you do make a mistake, take breaks, and then come back with a refreshed outlook. Okay, it's really about the journey. It's really about the journey. Okay, and I'm going to mark these off as I'm talk about them. Okay, so when it comes to patterns, working with patterns, if it's your first time working with a pattern, get really familiar with it. Read it from top to bottom, study the pictures, get a good sense that you understand what the techniques are, how things should be cut. Um, don't do anything to your fabric until you have run through it and feel really good about the process. Doesn't mean you have to know exactly how to do it, but how the fabric is going to be manipulated, that there is a seam allowance of this amount here. All of those things make a difference, especially if, when you have to cut them out, because some patterns don't come with seam allowances built in. So you really need to read through and understand if the seam allowance is integrated into the pattern or not. Okay, let's see. All right. So the next thing I would say regarding patterns is don't rely on the pattern sizes. There's no standardization of sizes. This is in ready to wear. The same translates to patterns. Always measure your body and then use those measurements along with the finished measurements on the back of the pattern envelope or in the PDF or however it's delivered to you. Use that information to determine the correct size. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, because what you may find, especially if in today's world, right, we are thin in the waist and thick in the hips, right? So patterns and standard sizes are not made in that way. So you very often will be editing things down and up to accommodate you. So you may have to buy something large enough to go around the size large enough to go around your hips, and then know that you're going to have to take it um, in the waist. Okay. Yeah. And you're probably, if you're sewing clothes, if that's your desire to sew clothes, you're probably doing it for that reason, because you can't find anything that will fit you well. So yes, you want to look snatched in the waist and all of that, but girl, please don't edit it down to your exact waist measurement. Please don't do that. You have to sit. You have to bend over. You have to eat. You have to breathe. Okay. So if you edit it down exactly to your waist measurement, the side effect is gas. Okay. And only God can help you if you're out and about in an outfit like that, right? Uh, Hopefully you've got some Pepsid or something to help you with that. But don't edit it down to the exact size. There's a thing called ease that is built into patterns, right? And all ease is extra space to allow you to bend, to sit, to eat, and all of those things that I just mentioned. Okay. So yes, we want to look snatched, but you've got to think about all of the function that you will be performing in that particular outfit. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's go to. So I've covered that. I've covered that. Okay. Math is involved. Okay. That's something that I think scares a lot of people. Math is involved when it comes to sewing. There's a lot of fractions. Okay. So if you're not familiar, you will by the end, you'll be frustrated in the beginning, but you'll get pretty familiar by the end. But I want to recommend this little simple, cheap little tool. So if you're not interested, I'm sorry, if you're not familiar with um, fractions, this little guy here, it's hard to see it, but there we go. You can see some of it. It has like little cutouts all around it, and each of them is a different fraction that you can then use to make the measurement for the thing that you're sewing. There we go. It's populating now. Okay. Yes, this little tool is perfect for those who don't feel confident. I use this a lot with my students who just need a little bit of help or extra, confidence in the fraction area. So the next thing I'll say is toile, toile, toile. Okay. So toile is really a test garment. Okay. So when you're making a pattern for the first time, you, if you made it straight out of the pack, it's good chance it's not going to be perfect for you. Even if you did use your measurement to determine which size, it's not going to be perfect in all areas. Each of us is different. We carry weight differently. And so you want to create what is called a toile or a muslin, which is basically a test garment out of a very cheap fabric, but one that is very similar, a similar fabric to the end fabric that you're going to use. Okay. So you make it out of this cheap fabric so that you can test the fit and make adjustments. Okay. And I would say do that before you touch your good fabric. Okay. Make sure you do a toile. I think I kind of mentioned this in other videos. When I started out on the journey of pattern making for bras and things like that, I would spend morning to night toiling, okay? Because every little change makes such a huge difference. And yeah, and I was trying to develop a range of not only styles, but a range of sizes. So it was really important that I got that correct. And it was only through the use of toiles that I was able to achieve that. Okay. It may seem like an extra step, but it's an extra step that you will appreciate in the end. Okay. And then because once you develop that pattern to the point, making the changes that are necessary, you end up with a tried and true that you could just, pull out of the pack and make some edits to it. And then, and not have to worry about the sizing. Right. So do it once and you're good to go. Okay. Unless you gain or lose weight, then that's then you'll do it again. Okay. On the back of the pattern are suggested fabrics. Okay. And here I'm just assuming that you'll be working with a pattern in the beginning. There are suggested fabrics. Girl, take the suggestion. Okay. Because the last thing you want to do is use a woven fabric with a pattern that is meant for stretching. Okay. For stretch fabric. You'll find very quickly you could probably just get your toe into it. So you want to make sure that you use a fabric that's similar or has similar characteristics to the ones that they suggest on the back of the pattern. Okay. Yes, your feelings will get hurt if you try what I just said. Okay. And as it relates to fabric, um, as a beginner, what I would say is if you're purchasing online, which is what I prefer to do, um, buy swatches until you get to a point where you kind of feel like you know what to expect from a particular fabric type or fabric weight, then fabric weight, then I would suggest getting swatches before you order a full any yardage online. I think it's important that you kind of spend the time getting to know what the fabrics are like before going all in. Okay, because what you will find is you'll end up with a library of fabrics that maybe sometimes you will never use. That's how we end up with all those extra scraps and things that are just hanging around because we didn't vet it properly. And then you'll be looking for, a potential project for that. And it'll be a waste of money. So I would say it's better to order a swatch, which usually is like $1, or two. And they usually arrive very quickly, depending on where you order it from. And just do that until you get to a point where you feel really comfortable to, take the chance and order yardage without doing that. Otherwise, I would suggest going in store and where you can touch and feel all of the fabrics. It will be advisable to do that, and that will alleviate some of the frustration with trying to figure things out. In addition to, you get to use the help of the sales folks in the store. They are very good at helping out. When it comes to picking out your fabrics and things like that. They're and in most stores, they're very, very, very eager to help as well. Okay. And when it comes to starting out, the types of fabrics, especially like for your first projects, I would say try to work with woven fabrics that are very stable. They have, what I mean by that is that they have no stretch in them, just kind of like what I, used to make these guys. They have no stretch. Okay. And I would suggest using like a medium weight fabric because it tends to run through the machine a lot smoother than very, very thin fabrics, especially thin and slippery fabrics like silks and satins. If you're working on your first, second, third, fourth, fifth project as a beginner, I would steer clear of satins, knits, all of those things that will have the ability to kind of shift on you as you are working them through the machine. Okay. Because they have a tendency to shifting and stretching on you, and then it'll end up distorted. And then you'll get frustrated and you'll wonder what you did wrong when it really isn't you. It's just that you haven't had the experience to work in working with those particular fabrics just yet. So I would start if you want a stress free first experience, start with wovens that are medium weight. Okay. And those are similar to muslin fabric, muslin, broadcloth, even double gauze, cotton double gauze it's a really good one. Linen fabrics, twill fabrics. Denim is a little bit on the heavier side, but you could still, do work with that better than the fabrics that are on the thinner and stretchier side. Okay. So, in addition to the types of fabrics, if you are planning on, and even if you're not, but if you're planning on sewing as a business, you want to test, test, test. Okay. You want to test the fabric, not just test your toiles and all of that, but you want to test the fabric and how it will hold up over time. So that means if it's a dress or something, wash and wear it, wash and wear it, wash and wear it until you start to see it breaking down. And the other thing too, you get to see if the color is fading or anything like that. Because if you want to stand behind the products that you put out, you'll need to go through this process. It's really important that you are able to stand by the product so that the customer doesn't come to you 30 days down the road and say, hey, it fell apart. Okay. If you're making something for someone, the assumption is the quality is better than what you will find in the stores. So you want to give them that, right? So, and one of the steps in doing that is by testing the fabric, washing it and wearing it. In fact, you don't want to approach any project without first washing your fabric. That is a must. And the reason being is because most often, number one, you'll get bleeding in some cases, but in most cases, it'll shrink up on you. And the last thing that you want to do is make something, especially something that's body conscious or just close fitting, only to have it rendered useless the moment you put it in the washer. Okay, so wash it first, and then you want to iron it so that when you're cutting out your fabric for the first time, that is nice and flat, similar to what it was when you purchased it from the store. If you leave it all wrinkly and you cut your pieces out, they'll be distorted, bigger in some places, wavy in some places. So you just want to make sure that you give yourself a good starting point by washing and ironing your fabric. Now, another part of a suggestion I want to make, and this is something that I've learned from my students. Um, Ironing is so I didn't learn this part, but I'll tell you what I learned. I learned that most people don't have irons. So when you are undertaking the craft or the business of sewing, you need an iron and either an ironing board or an ironing mat, something. Because the rule is you make a stitch and then you press. And I will tell you, when you press, it takes a homemade garment from good to great. In many cases, it looks like it came off of the showroom floor, out of retail. So it's an integral part of sewing. So you want to make sure that you invest in a steam iron. Okay. That's important, a steam iron, because that will get you the most bang for your buck. It'll get you the nice clean creases and things like that. But yes, you want to iron, and it's important that you do it along the way so that your garment does is made at home but doesn't look homemade. Okay. That's one thing that I really, really am a proponent of. And I have found since teaching that a lot of people don't have irons. And I also have found that that my students would like to skip that step. Okay. So I'm going to say to you, and I'm going to beseech that you and please don't skip that because it will make the difference. Now, one more thing about ironing. If you have made a mistake, ironing it hard and super hot is not going to hide or fix the mistake. In fact, it's going to make it more pronounced because what you will find is the iron will make shiny streaks on your fabric, and it'll look like you tried so hard to make that flat when it's really not flat. And then the moment you go and clean it, it's not going to be flat. And the other thing too, you're going to break down the fibers of the fabric. Okay, so ironing can make things great, but it cannot fix mistakes. Okay, so don't over iron or press it at the wrong temperatures. And your fabric, when you purchase it, generally has instructions on it about what the temperature should be. So when you're shopping, take a look at the bolt, the end of the bolt, and just snap a little picture of it so that you get the knowledge that you need in terms of care. Especially if you don't use that fabric right away, you can kind of like attach, the picture or put a note with it so that you know how to care for it down the road. So I've actually covered a few things here. Okay. Sewing, okay. A lot of us take on sewing because we have clothing issues or we can't find what we want in terms of the product in the store. Um, but what you will find is number one, the entire business of sewing can be really expensive. You have machines to buy, you have threads to buy, you have notions to buy, you have gadgets to buy, you have all these little things, even though it's like $10, $5, $2, these things add up. These things add up over time. So sewing can be an expensive hobby. So again, take your time. Don't try to jump in and buy everything all at once. So take your time. And on the other side of it being expensive, so it's expensive to you to amass all of these tools that you need. But it's also expensive if you're sewing for someone else. A lot of times, especially starting out as a beginner custom maker, you may have to buy all of your fabrics and notions in retail. That can get expensive. Fabrics can be very expensive, especially if you are looking for fabrics that are different. You have to learn how to kind of, pick through things and get things that look expensive, but maybe are not. But you some stores, like there's one local to me, it's called G Street Fabrics. I love it so much, but it's on the pricier side. And if you're sewing for a customer, that price gets passed down to the customer. So you want to try to work to find things that are, keep the cost down, right? So um, you can end up paying what you pay for ready to wear, for something that you're spending hours to make. So, what I would say, because what's going to happen is once you start sewing, whether it's just for personal or you are doing the custom thing, you're like maybe your friends are going to start noticing and they're going to want you to make things for them. So here's what I would say: make sure you give them a high price, okay? Unless you're doing it as a gift, okay? Because what's going to happen is once you start undercutting yourself, that's going to be the expectation among your friends, among especially if you start doing that with customers, because we're so accustomed to purchasing ready to wear, going to the store, just grabbing it off the shelf. Those clothes are made in another country, and the cost of labor is very low. The moment you engage a seamstress or a sewist here in the States, that's United States labor that has to be factored in. So I'm going to say to you, if you're doing it as a business, set the right prices. Um, you don't want to feel undervalued or devalued in this situation. And if you undercut yourself in the beginning, you're going to wear yourself out, and you're not going to love it anymore. You're not going to enjoy doing it anymore. And so I would say give them an exorbitant price, okay? But of course, within reason, you want to, the things that you want to consider. Think about the time it took you to shop around, look for whatever supplies you needed, pattern wise, whatever. The gas that it took you to drive to the store, find all of the fabrics, the time you spent to do all of those things. And then you have to think about all of the time that goes into cutting and putting it together. In addition to that, your fittings. You have to set an hourly rate that you're comfortable with so that at the end of the day, you feel valued. That is the thing that most seamstresses, that is the reason why most sewists don't take on commissioned work, because people are accustomed to ready to wear prices and they don't understand the value of custom. Custom is making it something special, especially for them. And if they can't see the value in that, then they're not your customer. And you have to find a polite way to say, I can't do it. So do yourself a favor, give yourself value, one that you feel confident in, and learn to be confident in putting that price out there. Learn to be confident in doing that. That's my number one advice if you're sewing as a business. Okay. So I think I just covered a bunch of things. Yeah, let me see. Okay, let's talk machines. So starting out, It's very easy to get caught up in the beauty of the machines you see in the stores, in the fabric stores. Don't get sucked into that, okay? You don't need a fancy machine in the beginning. You only need a basic machine. And I'm going to venture to say $100 or so. Spend about 150 on a good solid machine, one that has not a lot of features, but and most entry level machines can sew a variety of fabrics. The reason I say this is because if you're just starting out, you probably don't know what you enjoy sewing, right? You may start out wanting to make clothing, but you may find out you want to do handbags or you want to do quilting, right? So if you decide then that you want to do quilting, there are machines out there that are made specifically for that. Very long arm, so you have a lot of space for a lot of materials to go through the machine. Um, and you don't want to spend a lot on a machine that you're not really going to use the features of. Okay, so keep the machine basic on the lower end. And you guys already know I like Brother machines as entry level machines. I recommend them all the time. I don't get paid. I don't make a commission from them. Um, and I'm not sponsored by them. I just have used them a lot in my experience, and they have been solid. And in that process, I beat up a lot of them. And but I would always go back and get another one. I've tried other brands, but I tend to go back to the Brother. There's something about the way it handles the stitch. It's nice and consistent and clean, not too noisy. It's a very easy user interface. And for someone just starting out, you just don't want to be inundated with a lot of stuff in front of you. Okay. So, with regard to your machine, regardless if you do a fancy machine or a basic, they all need to be maintained. Okay. So I would say annually, take it in for a tune up and a deep clean. Okay. That will keep it moving nicely. If you're kind to your machine, it will be kind to you. Okay. And that's really, really important. There are things though that you can do in the process. I mean, throughout the year, like every other project, I would say pop off that needle plate, use your brush. Your brushes come with the machines. Okay. So I've got a couple here that look like this and like this. Mine are pretty beat up. Right. And so you pop the needle plate off and you use those brushes inside the machine. Now, I would not recommend and I would say stay away from canned air and vacuums because canned air has a tendency just to push the little dust bunnies farther into the machine and you'll never be able to get to them and it could be impacting something deep inside the machine, right? And then you'll end up having to take it in because it's just not working properly. The vacuums are not good because there are some parts of your machines that are not locked down and they may just be hanging on to like a spindle or something like that, and you go to put the vacuum in there, it'll suck those things out, and so you don't want to run the risk of doing that either. So I would say stay away from the vacuum, stay away from the canned air, but use your brushes and then just take it in for annual checkup. That's the best thing. Oh, and one more thing for those who are starting a sewing business, this may seem a little bit much, but what I would say is get a cheap backup machine. Okay, so once you start sewing, and maybe you starting out with a cheap machine, get two of them. Okay, because especially if you are sewing custom and you have tight turnaround times, tight deadlines, you don't want to let your customers down. Okay, because when you're starting out, your reputation is everything, and customers these days, they don't want to hear that your machine broke down. They don't want to hear that you were sick. They just want their stuff. And so when you don't deliver, they're quick to go to the internet and yeah, put you out there. So you want to make sure that You're taking care of your customers by adding some redundancy in your shop, okay? And having a second machine is basically a fail safe for that. And I think in my last video or one of my videos, I mentioned how many machines I have, and that's why I've got two of most things because yeah, I put my machines to work on a daily basis. They are truly horses, and I've been pretty happy with my machines. I don't have um, brother machines right now. I have my main machines are Husqvarna Viking machines. I have a two Sapphire 930s. I love that machine. I didn't love it at first because coming from brother has a higher speed in terms of stitches. These don't, and I had to learn how to, become more acclimated to just a little bit slower. It's not that big a deal, but I was spoiled. Excuse me. I was spoiled by the stitching speed. I want a high stitch speed because it's a production shop, so I want to get things done as quickly as possible. It's like typing, right? You want it to be really, really fast. Okay, so I think I have covered. Yeah. Okay. Thread types matter. Okay, that's my next point. If you are doing clothing or anything like that, even bags and things like that, you want to work with polyester. The polyester threads are most popular and usually best for most cases. They don't shed because cotton threads tend to shed on you. You can see like little fuzzies along the line of the string. Um, Cotton threads are easier to snap. Um, and I would actually recommend Gutermann. Gutermann is like the industry standard. Let's see if I can get you to see the name here. Yes. So Gutermann threads, very, very strong. And they have a bit of elasticity too, right? They have a little bit. So because as you're making clothes, right, we're pulling on them, we're bending in them, we need them to move with us. So this type of thread works really well for that. Okay. And there are like serger threads, polyester as well, but they tend to not be as strong, you know, and they come on cones like this. Okay, they're not as strong because when you're using your serger, it's multiple threads and it gets it. Those seams get their strength from the multiple threads, and it also is kind of used to finish the edge of a garment or a seam or whatever. So those threads don't usually get too much stress on them. Okay, so these threads tend to be a little bit less strong. Okay, another thread type that I use, especially doing lingerie, this one is called a woolly nylon thread. You can see that it's really fuzzy, has a lot of stretch to it. Okay, it's a nylon thread. I use this a lot in lingerie to finish off, seams, putting in elastic, all of that because it's really, really soft and great against the skin. Okay, so you really just want to, so you take a look around, depending on the things that you're planning on sewing. Take a look around to figure out which thread is best for you. But polyester thread is the one, and Gutermann is the industry standard, and it's a bit more expensive as well. So once again, going back to sewing can be pretty expensive. Okay. All right. Let's talk scissors. All scissors are not good scissors for sewing. Okay. What I find with my students, they have scissors laying around the house that look like this. And so they want to use those to cut out their patterns and things like that. And they end up getting really, really frustrated. Number one is because these are not very sharp. They're meant for cutting paper. Okay. They're not very sharp. The other thing is they are not ergonomic when it comes to cutting. When you are cutting fabric, the goal is to keep the fabric as flat on the surface as possible. And as you're cutting with this, it's going to cut at an angle, right? It'll cut at an angle. And so it means that it will lift your fabric up from the table or the surface as it's cutting, right? So I would say uh, get yourself a pair of good fabric shears that usually look like this. Trust me, you'll love me for this advice. Okay. And as you can see, ergonomic, it glides across the table. But not only that, these are super, super sharp. Okay. And if somebody wants to use your scissors, tell them no. Tell them no. These you guard, okay, because you want to keep them sharp. And because the thing is when you want, if they become dull, a lot of times it's better to send these off to the company to have them resharpen them. Okay. There are some companies like Fisker that makes sharpeners, but I don't know how well they work with things like this. You'll find yourself becoming also a connoisseur of scissors. So I have these guys too. These are like little thread nippers, right? I find myself reaching for these a lot because when I'm sewing seams all day, the last thing I want to do is grab these by the handle and they're so long, and then try to cut my threads. This is spring loaded, and you just operated it just like a pair of tweezers. Okay, so these I love these. You can get these so cheap, and they usually come like 12 in a pack, like for maybe $5. Okay, so yes, get yourself a great pair of scissors, and you love me for it, and write me down in the comments and let me know that you followed that advice and you thank me. Okay. All right. So let's see. All right. One more thing I wanted to mention. One needle does not work for all fabrics. Yes, there are universal needles. Universal needles basically says I can sew a range of fabrics that are within a specific, continuum. You know, medium weight fabrics, or light to medium, and then some heavier weight fabrics up to denim. So, and they do that relatively well. The universals have kind of a ball point. They're not very sharp on the tip. But when you start to sew finer fabrics, like silks and satins, you'll find that that universal needle, when it goes through, is pulls on the threads of your fabrics, and it oftentimes will puncture your fabric. And when you hold it up to the light, you'll see a hole through it. Well, you've just ruined your fabric. So you have to look for new. There are needles that are specific for lightweight fabrics, like fine fabrics, like silks and satins. They're usually like 7 and 8. Um, in terms of the number of size. And yes, so just be mindful that there are, you know, needles for every task. There are ones that are specifically for leather because the hide of a leather is so thick. It has like the needle has like a little knife at the end of it, and so when it goes through, it punctures a hole. Okay, through. And yes, and so and you don't want to use that for your regular fabrics because once again, it'll puncture a hole, and that hole won't heal itself. It'll just continue to unravel. So um, one, know that you need different sizes, different types of needles, especially even for stretch fabrics. There are certain types. There are jersey needles for that. And so the other thing too is how often should you change them? Change them. Just the hard and fast rule, I would say every other project, unless you happen to nip the needle against a pin going under the machine. And if you've done that, it usually takes off the tip, and then next thing you know, you're hearing a noise that sounds like it's puncturing through your fabric. So I would say every other project or so, if you can get away with that, because they do become dull. Okay, so if you can get away with, but for me, I run my machines all of the time, so I buy them in bulk. And in terms of brand, Schmetz needles are very good. I have that here. I have a box here. But Schmetz needles are uh, also an industry standard. Okay, and they come in a variety of sizes. Some there are some that are specifically for denim as well. Okay, so just kind of do your research, and you can. Now, again, if you want me to do a video on that, I'm happy to. Just let me know down in the comments. Okay, happy to do that. Okay, I think I've covered everything. I think I've covered everything. So, thank you again for watching today. I really appreciate you joining me for my third episode of Sew Jeaux Live. If you are part of the replay crew, please comment. I would be so ecstatic to receive a comment from you. And trust me, I will reply. Okay, so that's it for me. Everyone, goodbye. Remember to create something beautiful.